Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. I am solo hosting tonight as Greg is still traveling around the world. I'm your host, Aaron Quinn. And tonight we got a really special guest. I'm really excited for this one. It's very rare that when we do another team that we get to do it with somebody that we've worked with in the past. And tonight we have our good friend, Jake Burns. Jake, how you been, man, since you left the Cover One team? How you doing?
It's been up and down, man. I've done a couple different endeavors with Cleveland.com, and then where I'm currently at with Scout, which is 247 and the Orange and Brown Report, and it's been a little crazy. It's been a nice second half of last year after things started to turn around for him, and then this year it's been a nosedive. So otherwise we're good. Family's good. Everything else is pretty solid. But the football team we cover right now is a bit of a train wreck.
I bet, yeah. So last we were talking quite a bit when Tyrod Taylor came over to the Browns, and I was like, "Oh my God, rest in peace." Your mentions, it's going to be horrible if it was anything like the Bills, and that actually passed pretty quickly. Not too bad. I was kind of watching the peripheral. Nothing like you're dealing with this year. And
yeah. I think the thing that Tyrod Taylor expectations were managed. I think everybody had a broad set of opinions on him, and I think that those wide ends of the spectrum about Tyrod sort of balanced out, and he floundered out of here quickly, and that's okay. I mean, it was a bridge anyway, and the bridge ended quicker than everyone expected. But with Mayfield, I think everybody was so ready for the thing that's made this year hard, Aaron, is that there was no evidence of this coming. There was no evidence of this fall off. People who have tried to predict it, it's been a little interesting to me to watch people who have tried to predict it because there's no empirical evidence that's showing it.
Yeah.
That showed it was coming. Now there's, I talked to you about this before we started this, but there's a ton of people that want to know what the hell is wrong, and we're going to touch on this a lot, I'm sure, as we go. But it's a myriad of things. It's not just Baker. It's not just the offensive line. It's not just play calling. It's a mixture. And, I think that's what's been the most difficult thing for the Browns fan base is going from, we have this guy, we finally got a guy, which is what I know Bills fans are feeling, as Josh Allen is getting better. And, that feeling of, we think we got our guy. I think we're kind of both there. We think we got our guy. Could things change on a whim? Sure. That's what happened here, but it didn't happen on a whim. It happened like falling off a cliff. And it's just been so uncontrollable. And so what the hell happened? That it's been tough. It's been tough on the fan base, and it's been tough on everybody. And the losing partnered with poor quarterback play has been it's been a challenge.
Yeah, and I'm usually the guy that it's kind of a running joke of pump the brakes in our chat rooms and stuff like that. Of, well, let's see till things come out, and especially when a team will get a lot of guys in the spring or bring in a bunch of guys, and you hear the ESPNs and the Good Morning Football start to crown them early. But with the Browns, I usually want to be that guy, but it was really hard for me to see all the pieces coming together. I'm a big Baker Mayfield fan, and to see all those pieces coming together and say, holy cow, like, there's also a part of me that wants the Browns to succeed. There's kind of that similarity between the two cities, the two franchises. And if there's anyone in the league, especially in the AFC, I don't want to see any really AFC team succeed. If there is one, though, that I want to see get over that hump, it's a team like the Browns. And so I kind of bought into that too. And I think for everyone, it was hard to not buy into all those things and be excited for Cleveland. And then one thing with the NFL season that's really tough, and I think your fans probably are having a tough time dealing with this, is it is a short season. If you don't start out and you start spinning your wheels, man, it is really tough to rebound from that. It doesn't make you a bad team. I think the Bills have played a number of teams that are mediocre this year that just are spinning their tires and they can't seem to find ways to win games, but they're in games. And I think that's, from the few games that I've watched, it seems like a few things get out of control, but they never are fully out of the game. They still kind of continue on playing the game, and they just can't seem to get out of their own way. And then you're already blink, and it's 8 weeks through the season, and then it feels like sort of a lost year.
Yeah, I think everybody looked at the Browns' schedule and had a pretty good feeling that it was going to be an extremely difficult start.
Right.
If you look at where they started the year, Tennessee, although Tennessee is not uber talented, they are always a team who plays to their competition. And is a team that has had cohesiveness over the last 3 years, 3 9-7 finishes. That's a tough way to start because you're facing a team who's very in sync, very used to each other. Cleveland wasn't. That's fine. You go as the season gets going, 49ers, who I figured were going to be a better football team, that panned out. It's obviously panned out.
Yeah.
You obviously talk about New England. You talk about how good Seattle is. They've played a very challenging start to the year. Everybody knew that when we looked at it. They said, okay, chop this thing in half. You have to come out of the first 8 games 4-4, 3-4, 4-4. Then you give yourself a chance in the second half against, which has panned out into the worst, other than Buffalo. It is the worst schedule. One of the worst, maybe the second worst schedule remaining in terms of just winning percentage. So there are opportunities to win, but you cannot start 2-6. And they let games like the Rams slip away. They let games like Seattle slip away, games that they had a very fair chance to win. And obviously, this Denver game that they just played, those games flip, and there's sometimes just one play, like you mentioned. And even look at the Titans game. It was a 15-13 game going into the fourth quarter. They've been in games. They're talented, but what we've come to understand about, and this is, it's a topic of discussion amongst Browns fans and board postings and all of these things, which is John Dorsey has done a great job acquiring talent. He is an off-season winning guy. He acquires talent. But does he understand how to build a team? Those are different concepts, collecting talent against what team building is. I think Buffalo's got a sense of team building going. I think the Colts have a sense of team building. New England has always had a grasp for team building. Right. I just don't know that there's an understanding of what it takes to build culture and team building within the offices in Berea. And, like you said, though, a couple plays flip here or there. They're maybe a 500 team right now. But at the end of the day, they lead the NFL in penalties and yardage among penalties, and they're turning the football over at a high clip, and that's undisciplined football. So you probably don't deserve to be 4-4. So they are where they are, for lack of a better cliche. Their goal right now has to be to get to 6-6, though. They have to try to get to 6-6. If you can do that, which 4 games, this one being uber challenging to start, but then you have the next 3 games are very winnable, and then you go into the last 4 games with Arizona, a game against Cincinnati, a game against Miami, and a game against Baltimore that could get you to 9 or 10 wins. So that's where they're trying to get to. It's not all lost. 2-6 feels like your season could be over. I get it. A lot of Browns fans are sort of doing the doom and gloom, but that's where we're at. 2-6 is a challenge to start the year. We thought that they had a better chance toward 500, and they were a couple plays away, but they deserve to be in the bed that they've made.
It's tough because we're dealing with this with the Bills fans, even though they're 6-2. Everybody wants immediate success. So a big topic this week was Ed Oliver seeing a dip in his snap percentage and not starting anymore. And obviously everybody wants Josh Allen to be a world beater in his 18th, 19th start. And I'm trying to connect that to Cleveland in the sense that everybody wants things now. And there's plenty of time left with Baker Mayfield. There's plenty of time left with all these guys that you've acquired talent-wise. And so it can't be all doom and gloom. There's got to be some excitement over there in Cleveland. And like you said, out of all the 2-6, 3-win teams, they're still probably the most talented. I know Sean McDermott got ripped by our local media a little bit here today because he was asked about the Browns. He says it every week. Every coach is going to say it. This is a talented team. They got a lot of talent, all this stuff like that. And people were like laughing at him. Oh, Cleveland's a tire fire. Not. I'm kind of saying, hey, guys, careful, because when you actually watch this team, yes, the record looks like a tire fire, and yes, the Baker interview ended poorly the other day or a week ago, and it looks bad. The optics look bad, but this team is not the New York Jets. This is not a tire fire. This franchise is in shambles. This is a franchise that I think still in the next 3 years is going to be an ascending franchise within the division as soon as they figure it out. And like you said, change the turnover ratio, clean up the penalties, and you do those 2 things alone, and you say you're a 500 team already.
Yeah, and this is kind of a dangerous game for Buffalo in terms of trap games, because if you look at Cleveland just got trap game by Denver, and all it takes is Cortland Sutton catches a ridiculous throw over the top of Denzel Ward. You get beat on one play action where you miss a tackle and it's a 75-yard touchdown, and then all of a sudden you're down 14-3 and you're pressing and you maybe turn the ball. This is Cleveland. You're right. That's a great point you made. Cleveland is a very talented, individual-based talented team. They have not put it together. They have not put it together for 4 quarters in any game that they have played. The numbers show it. The film shows it. It all lines up. But if they do, they're good. They can play with people. They have the talent to play with people, to the point that if you let Odell Beckham, who has not gone off in a game, he could be due for a game that he goes off. You just never know. The NFL is a wicked and wild SOB, and it changes every week. And if you take somebody lightly, it takes a couple plays, and that's all it takes to swing a game in the NFL. So I'm sure Sean McDermott is telling his guys and showing them film and talking about these guys are, because he'd be silly not to do that. The same way the Browns would be silly not to go into Denver thinking that they're talented. But it is a game where you can get caught up in, like you said, the terrible optics. They're 2-6. These guys are trash. It's the same old Browns. That stuff can happen, and it's dangerous, and it creeps into minds. And I'm sure that is the biggest thing that McDermott is trying to fight this week.
Well, let's kind of flip the kind of overarching big picture view to the Bills. I know that you kind of keep an eye on these guys peripherally. They are 6-2. A lot of the wins are being criticized as weak wins. You know, their schedule has not been a strong schedule. They've come back and beat some teams that are probably they should have dominated. They've had a pretty rough stretch here over the last 3 games running defense. They've been a pretty excellent defense up until the last 3 weeks. They've been exposed over the last 3 weeks. Really got punched in the mouth by Miami. If it wasn't for a Tre'Davious White interception in the end zone, that game gets away from them, and that's Miami's first win right there. So yes, they are 6-2, but is very much a vulnerable team. And like you said, I think the talent of the Cleveland Browns beats out the talent of the Buffalo Bills. But if the Buffalo Bills, it's a matter of playing clean football, playing team football. But I'd like to get your view kind of this team overall as a not a fan.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier about the two franchises mirroring each other, and they have a lot of weird similarities. I know Buffalo's had better success over the past few decades and dating back into the 90s, obviously. And but there's been a similar struggle. There's been a similar forgotten feeling that I'm sure you guys get up there the same way we get in Cleveland. And there's been a sort of similar rebuild path. There's been some similar crossover players.
A lot of quarterbacks.
There's been a similar and the similar 2018 quarterback draft class parallels. It's a team that I've always, dating back to when I found you guys at Cover One and what you do, and really what I tried to do with my Browns Film Breakdown site, originally YouTube channel, podcast, was all built on what I loved that Cover One did. I thought he did a fantastic job, and Eric did a fantastic job over there covering that team, and I thought Cleveland needed something like it, so I tried to cultivate it. And I've always paid close attention to the Bills because of it, because I think they're a fun franchise. And, a lot of people in the Browns fan base, when they hired Hugh Jackson, there was a consensus that they wanted Sean McDermott, that a lot of the board voted to pick Sean McDermott, but they were overruled by the owner to select Hugh Jackson. So it's always been like, what's Sean McDermott doing? We really like this guy. So yeah, there's just a ton of connections. Jordan Poyer among many others. So, they're an up and coming football team who has found their groove in some favorable games, but you win those games. You have to beat who's on the schedule. And I would rather, to be honest with you, I'd rather come out of the first half of the year 6-2 with some games that maybe, we probably could have lost that game, but we won it, than go into it 2-6 or 3-5. You got to win games. And then from there you get confidence. You get the feeling for, hey, this is what it takes to win on Sundays. Sure, the competition level might step up, but you haven't dropped any games you weren't supposed to necessarily win. So I think Buffalo has a lot going for them. Obviously, on the defensive side of the football with Edmonds and White and Poyer and Hyde and plethora of those guys. I loved Ed Oliver. It was a shame the Browns were too far down to get him, even if they kept their first round pick. So we were big Ed Oliver people. Among many other players on that defensive roster who I think are phenomenal. Wallace is a good player. From afar. I'm not up to it on every single day. I got to really dig out. We do a behind enemy lines thing on Friday, so I spend all day Thursday kind of checking over the other team. But I've kept up with it far. I really like Devin Singletary. I think he's a good football player, very shifty, does a nice job with patience. Contact balance is good. Frank Gore's a great mentor for him. Frank Gore's just the OG, man. You love that guy.
I love him.
I've enjoyed seeing Josh improve. I think that he's done some really nice things. He's certainly has some things he's still trying to figure out. His downfield passing is something that he's trying to figure out, and I think it'll come with time. I think that he is going to be a quarterback in the league for a long time. His ceiling is still as high as it was when they drafted him, but I think his floor has raised, and I think that's an important part of things for any quarterback. And I was hard on Josh coming out. I did not think he was the right pick at first for Cleveland, But I do think that there were people that took it too far. I think there were people that were trying to say this guy can't make it. He's not. No, he's the right type. And I think if he got in the right offense, which I think Brian Dable's done some things for him that have helped him, and the continuity of year to year has helped him as well. And I think he's going to be a top half of the league quarterback. Can he get to that level where he's a top 10, top 5 guy? I don't know. I think it depends on how comfortable of a scheme he gets in. Can he become one of those guys who are scheme, I call him, sort of the group that is, it doesn't matter about scheme. They can overcome anything. The Deshaun Watson types that have been able to prove that they can get over anything. Maybe he gets there. I don't know. It all depends on how the game slows down. And he has the athletic ability. He has the arm strength. It's just about the cerebral side of things and making good decisions. And the thing is that window's still open for him to do it. The same way I think it is still there for Mayfield. But it's, the year 2 curve. I think what happened is Carson Wentz, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, those guys ruin what year 2s look like. Sometimes year 2s don't look like those years. And I think people get caught up, myself included, get caught up on, well, these guys have got to take the Jared Goff. The year 2 leap is what they have to do. That's not necessarily the case. It's not a linear path to quality quarterbacking. And, maybe these guys have a little bit of a bump in the road, Sam included, and maybe they figure it out. It's way too early to have judgments, but what I do like is that Josh is improving, and he's gotten better from year 1 to year 2, and Buffalo fans should be very encouraged by that. And they did a great job of surrounding him with talent, which you guys all know. I think that John Brown's a fantastic receiver who doesn't get enough credit in this league. Cole Beasley's a maestro underneath, just a quick, shifty guy who can get in and out of cuts, and he's fun as hell. And I think they've done a nice job of putting talent around him. Dawson Knox has some potential. I've seen some things from him I liked. I haven't seen enough to really give a full answer on him, but I liked him coming out. Felt good enough about him, to at least have been comfortable if Cleveland wanted to take him. So, it's going to be a challenge for Cleveland because they're very aggressive. They're super zealous, I guess is the word, in play action. They can be taken advantage of defensively. Their front four is solid. They're good. They can get after the passer, but you can screen game the hell out of them. And, so on the other side of things, I think it's going to be fascinating defensively to watch how they handle Cleveland's run game because that's one thing Cleveland does pretty well. Denver boxed them in, did a nice job in being patient and lane discipline. But if you're too quick to fight over a gap or you're too quick to leave your gap to go after Nick Chubb, that guy is as patient a player as there is a running back in the NFL, and he has the vision that is really top-notch in the league, and he will make you pay if you are not disciplined with run fits. So If that is a problem, he will make you pay. Denver is the first team that really did a nice job anchoring run fits on him, and he had, I think, 10 carries for 65 yards. But if you let him get off, he will get off. But how Mayfield is able to navigate this secondary that is just playing phenomenal football, one of the top 4 coverage units for Pro Football Focus, and what their game plan is, because the Browns have only taken 3 shots downfield of 40 yards or more. They're not taking deep downfield shots. They're not taking 30-yard throws like they did last year. So teams are scrunching toward the line of scrimmage. Second level's getting tighter. Mayfield's windows are getting tighter. Can they continue to make Cleveland feel compressed in that secondary? I think that they will do a good job with that. So it's a lot. That's a lot I'm throwing at you, but
let's flip it back. I want to focus a little bit more on the offense and our offensive matchup versus your defensive matchup, because even before I started watching the Cleveland Browns and what you guys have been able to do on that side of the ball, the talent on that side of the ball, especially along the defensive line, has scared me. The Bills brought in a lot of guys along the offensive line this year. I think that fans got a little overzealous of the upgrade because it was one of the maybe historically worst offensive lines last year, along with the Arizona Cardinals. And I think they got to about below average when it was all said and done. I love the addition of Mitch Morse, obviously. I was a little higher on what Tyne Secchi would actually bring. He's done an okay job. But anyways, they've upgraded that line. But when I look across at the Cleveland Browns and I see the talent, the Myles Garrett, like that specifically scares me. Deion Dawkins has had a nice rebound year so far this year. I don't know what the Bills are going to be able to do to kind of contain your guys' pass rush and keep Josh Allen upright, because Josh Allen is prone to fumbling. He's been prone to turnovers, and a lot of that comes when it's applied pressures. The Browns have the ability to get to the quarterback. We saw him do it against Tom Brady. We've seen him do it all year long, really. If you're the Bills, having watched the Browns and monitor that defense, what would you do to try to keep a freak like Myles Garrett at bay and try to keep Josh Allen clean this week.
Yeah, I mean, and it's you mentioned Miles, which is obviously the headliner, but they've got nice things from Sheldon Richardson, who they signed along the interior. Larry Ogunjobi does okay, not quite as good as we hoped he would be, but he's done okay. And then Olivier Vernon's been a very, very, very nice contribution on the opposite side. They brought him over from New York, so they have 4 guys who are very capable. If I were really concerned about how I was going to keep my quarterback clean, I would watch 2 games. I would watch Denver that they just played. Miles was nullified in the past game. And then I would go back and watch Tennessee because they were without Taylor Lewan in that game, and they did a nice job of managing pressure. But what teams have done is they've been in run formations often. They've been aggressive in how they approach run game, running at Miles, making him defend the run, wearing him down on first and second down so that on third down he can't pin his ears back with full stamina and get after the quarterback. But they've used wide receiver chips. They've used tight end chips or full-on tight end pass-off blocking where it's 1,000, 2,000, and then he can go after the tackle. And they've done a nice job using play action to slow him down. So I would watch those games because those guys are shorthanded. And if you have a big concern about blocking this Browns front, I would genuinely go about it with a cautious approach at almost that cautious aggression where you pick and choose where you take shots downfield. You stay out of unprotected tackle situations in the gun, whether it's 5 wide or whether it's just one back in the backfield. I would stay out of those if you really feel like you can't handle them, I would stay out of those situations and try to stay in front of the sticks as much as you can so that there's a little bit more run pass unpredictability. Because if you allow Miles to be one-on-one often and say, 35 snaps where you're going to throw the football and you allow him to get 25 of those with nobody helping your tackle, you're probably going to give up a sack or 2. He's just that talented, and they got guys around him who can get there too. So I think you really need to get in run formations often, play action them, use your tight ends, use your speedy wide receivers to get in situations where you're getting wide receivers on crossing routes against linebackers and safeties who have not done a good job covering the middle of the field. The Browns get obliterated by tight ends. Opposing tight ends just kill them week to week, and it is largely due to terrible eye discipline and play action. Noah Fant went for 115 yards. That rookie's on my fantasy team, and let me tell you, he hadn't done anything like that all year until they played Cleveland, amongst many other tight ends who have continued to get off against Cleveland for the past 3-4 years. So I would be aggressive with the middle of the field, but I would make sure to use play action, make sure to use chipping techniques, make sure to use line slide techniques, and stay out of situations where Josh is a sitting duck in the backfield and can be picked on, and that fumbling situation, like you mentioned, can become a problem. And you just don't want Josh to feel panicked. The same way I don't want Baker to feel panicked right now, because those happy feet and those mechanics start to slide downhill, and then that's when sailed passes happen. That's when throws that are just not pinpoint tend to happen to these guys. So that's kind of where they're at with their defense.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you mentioned that because Eric and I talk a bunch, and we talked with our members in the Slack channel about, I think that Josh has performed the best in play action. So I think that actually plays to his strengths right now because we saw it last week against the Redskins. It really opens up the middle of the field for him. And when you have a smart, intelligent route runner like Cole Beasley or John Brown who can come back, run nice hitches, you can really open up some stuff for Josh. So I think that does play to some of his strengths. Something I ask my guests every week, and we haven't seen a ton of it this year from Josh Allen though, is how does your team so far held up with athletic quarterbacks? Because even though he hasn't rushed for a crazy amount like he did for a stretch last year, that threat's still there. It's still on film. You guarantee Wilkes is thinking about that and how to contain him. And it also impacts the pass rush. A lot of teams, when they play a quarterback like that, tend to stay more in their lanes instead of letting guys just rip and open up some running lanes. How do you think the Browns are going to try to keep Josh Allen in the pocket and make him a passer?
Well, last week they struggled on a few key third downs, keeping Brandon Allen in the pocket. They got undisciplined. They chased inside and allowed him to run for a first down on 3rd and 11, and I think they allowed him to run for a big chunk of yards on a 2nd and 14 or something. I mean, they just have to be run gap discipline. I think they have to be the type where if you have an advantageous move, take it and beat somebody, but if not, get your hands locked into a chest and be ready to knock a ball down, or be ready to shed and shuck and get after him if you see him duck his eyes and take off. So I would imagine they're preaching it. They play Lamar Jackson twice a year, so they certainly know how to handle these guys. But Lamar Jackson comes from a different offense where it's entirely different approach. So, they haven't – I mean, they played Russell Wilson, and they did a fine job against Russell Wilson, but they were very patient. they did not really shoot up field. They really did a lot of lock and shuck type stuff where they were at the line of scrimmage, patient, waiting on him to make a decision. I would expect them to do that. So Josh needs to make sure that he's settled, trusting what's going on in front of him, understanding that the Browns will probably be patient at the line of scrimmage, ready to take on anything that he does in terms of running. And I would bet that the Browns' game plan is make Josh beat us with his arm, because that's what they want to see. And I'm sure that's most teams' approach right now. Hell, that's most teams' approach with Baker Mayfield: keep him in the pocket and make him beat us with the arm. So I would expect them to have a similar game plan. And if you guys really want to go back and watch how that Seattle technique worked, they were for the most part okay. Seattle's just a different animal because Russ's 20 big time throws in 8 games is ridiculous, and they run some rub routes that are wild that do a nice job. But they did a pretty solid job of keeping him contained. So if you're really interested, that would be the game to go back and watch how they'll play. I would expect them to do something very similar. I do think sometimes they'll pin their ears back and try to go after him and play zone behind it so that they can keep their eyes upfield at the quarterback and be able to adjust and take off if they need to. But I think, like you said, it'll be a big point of emphasis that they don't want Josh getting out on third downs and picking up a ton of first downs with his legs to keep those drives going.
Denzel Ward is a dude I love. I loved him in the draft. I love his game. I think we're starting to get to the point. I don't know if the Browns shadow particular receivers at all this year, but I think we're starting to get to the point where John Brown is a guy that would be considered maybe probably the only real threat in the passing game for the Bills. Would they even consider shadowing him, or how do you think they plan on limiting the only like real wide receiving threat from this team?
Yeah, they probably will. When they were playing last year, Denzel shadowed John Brown with the Ravens in the first matchup when he was still playing with Flacco, where he was a bigger part of the threat run or pass game wise. When Lamar took over the end of the year, he was just sort of a non-factor because they didn't know how the hell to get him the ball. So I do think that they will probably shadow him. He played John really well, and he has played John really well. He's the type of receiver that he matches up really well against. The Browns struggle with opposing wide receivers who are big physical guys who have really hurt them this year. A.J. Brown, week 1, hurt them big time. He's a very good big guy, Ole Miss product, very good player, big physical body. DK Metcalf hurt them big time against Seattle, and Cortland Sutton hurt them as well. Those are the types who have hurt them and hurt Denzel, those guys with big size, big frames. They are pretty typically at least have been okay against the smaller types because that's the body type in general that Denzel has and Greedy has as well. Greedy Williams, their other starting corner. So this probably is a favorable wide receiver matchup for Cleveland, but TJ Carey against Cole Beasley in the slot will be pretty fascinating. Carey's been playing outside a lot because Carey is a guy who can fill in. The Browns lost Denzel and Greedy for 5 weeks in the middle of this whole season, and they sort of suffered because TJ is not a great outside guy, but he is a much more comfortable and much more capable nickel corner. So that matchup will be a swing matchup in my opinion, because if Cole can continue to get loose against him, it will give Cleveland some fits. The way, I think Edelman did a nice job in the slot against Cleveland, but they found ways to work him in zone, find some wiggle room for him there. So that'll be a fascinating matchup. But as far as your original question, Denzel and John Brown, it'll be a shadow situation probably. Maybe they feel a little bit more comfortable this year because Greedy's a good man-to-man corner type 2 who can run with John. So that one will – they may not, but I would guess they will since Denzel's had some success against John in the past.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I would love to see Cole Beasley have a big game instead of John Brown because he's had nice production. I think probably silent production for Bills fans, but it would be nice to see him have a kind of coming out game here halfway through the season. Let's flip it over to the other side because that was all the talk of the Cleveland Browns going into this year, what Baker Mayfield was able to do at the end of last year. And I think Bills fans kind of don't want to admit it. There's a lot of us feeling like all the other 2018 quarterbacks have to do poorly for Josh to succeed. So nobody wants to admit when somebody's done something well. But Baker did great, and they brought him the cavalry, really. You get OBJ, the most dynamic guy. Again, Bills fans kind of laughed at Cleveland when they got him, but I'll tell you what, Bills Twitter, when they heard that he was on the trade block, were saying, give it all, give everything for this guy. He's dynamic. So I really like the weapons that you guys have on that side of the ball. Like you said, though, it hasn't quite all come together yet. How does Freddie Kitchens I think partially, and you can answer this, I think he's gotten maybe a little too smart for his own good with this offense a little bit. And I think this would be a good week to bring it back because the Bills do play very sound discipline, especially in the pass game. You're not going to trick them with a lot of stuff. I think you just have to come out and play pretty simple, sound discipline football and not let them create any turnovers or capitalize on your mistakes. How do you think Freddie Kitchens is looking at this Bills defense so far? Obviously, the run game, leaky at best, and you guys have one of the most dynamic running backs in the league. What's he looking at this defense, and how do you think he plans on attacking it?
Well, if I were him, I would do everything I can to make Buffalo respect running the football. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean turning and handing it off the first 15 plays of the game, but it could mean extensive play action, and it could mean force feeding the ball to Odell. I think Odell's frustrated. He's not been a negative influence on things. He's not been cancerous in any way, but he is frustrated. As any guy whose team is 2-6, he wants to win. He wants to win, and when they're not winning and he's not getting the ball, it's a combination there that is going to lead to some frustration. Now, they're talking this week about really trying to emphasize getting the football. Baker Mayfield is not a feed a single player type of guy. He is a guy who tries to find the open player on every throw, whether that's Demetrius Harris or whether that's Ricky Seals-Jones or Odell Beckham. I'm not sure if he's fit for a big-time receiver. I think he's just fit for guys who are solid and tight ends who are dynamic and they can use in different ways. So I'm fascinated this last half of the year to see if he even is a guy who should be playing with a wide receiver who demands the football because he doesn't like to play that way. So it's going to be interesting. There was, like I said, some chatter about forcing him the ball, getting him involved more often. So that will probably be emphasized. But if Cleveland's going to win, as their formula has been, they're going to get something from Nick Chubb. They're going to get a big something. They're going to try to get him as involved as they can initially, and in the middle, try to maybe jump out on some play. Like I said, they've only attempted 3 throws above, 40 yards. They've only attempted, I think, 19 above 25 yards. So they're not throwing the football downfield. So the wrinkle would be you zig to the zag. Maybe this week they come out trying to take some deep shots, and it would make a lot of sense to me to sort of loosen up because the Bills did a good job in run defense because their safeties were active part of run fits. If the Browns can't drive the football downfield against teams that have safeties being active parts of run fits at or near the line of scrimmage, you got a big problem because they have weapons. They have Antonio Callaway that can run. They have Odell who can do some things. Obviously, Jarvis is a middle of the field operator. If I'm looking at a necessary game plan, it involves getting Nick involved in wide zone, getting him involved in pin pull stuff that they've been good at, and then taking some shots downfield off of play action, making sure that Nick Chubb, even if he's not running the football, is a valuable asset to the offense through deception. So that's where I would be sort of thinking Freddie needs to look at is early on play action, early down play action, and then using Nick Chubb to ice a game away at the end.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you at all, and it terrifies me, the idea of what Nick Chubb, even like you said, in that play action game, because I think it's been stressed here by local reporters. It's been stressed here by the coaching staff over the last few weeks. The run game's the hottest topic in town. They said it was fixed. They came out. Adrian Peterson put up 100 yards in the first half. It looked like he was on his way to a 200-yard day. They did fix some of the stuff in the second half. Now, can the Bills do that for a full game and put it together? I think the pressure's on. The only thing that concerns me there, and you know this, is when that type of pressure and narrative just gets built, you start to press some of that stuff. And when it comes into the run game and the play action game, like you said, if they come out and they just start throwing some play action, you're pressing on the run and stuff starts to open up. And that is a big concern for me in this matchup. The thing I think I'm most excited about watching, it's going to be really hard to watch on the broadcast view, and that's probably my biggest disappointment, is Tre'Davious White versus Odell Beckham Jr. because I think Tre'Davious White's by far the best player on the Buffalo Bills. I think he's by far MVP. I think he should be in consideration for All-Pro. I don't know if he'll ever get there because Buffalo is Buffalo, and you just don't get that kind of hype for a guy like that. He hasn't been tested the way Odell Beckham Jr. tests people. He is just such a dynamic wide receiver. And if they're trying to force him the ball, if that's, our narrative is the run game and fixing the run game, if your narrative is getting Odell Beckham the ball and they're really making a concerted effort to do that, I think this could be a really interesting swing matchup and a test to see if my opinion of Trey White's true, that he is an All-Pro. If he can go out, I'm not expecting him to shut OBJ down, but if he can test OBJ on everything and stays with him, this could be a really big pivotal game for him in his career.
Yeah, and I think Odell has faced a really good slate of corners to begin the year. He's faced Shaquille Griffin, who's doing a fantastic job in Seattle, sort of flying under the radar like Tre'Davious White is there in Buffalo. But Chris Harris and Stephon Gilmore. He's played some really good guys who have given him good matchups, but he's also been open in those games, and they haven't found him. So I do think you're right. I think it's going to be a fascinating matchup. I think Odell brings out a certain level of play from opposing corners. They really like that challenge. He's that guy. He's that guy that you raise your eyebrows go up as an opposing player and say, we got to figure out how to stop him, or I got to be on my A game to play him. And I do think, I wish there was an ISO cam. That'd be a lot of fun because those two will go at it. And I think that, like you said, and like the Browns are saying, they're making an emphasis to try to get the ball in 13's hands, at least give him more opportunities. His target numbers, especially inside the red zone, he's like 89th in the NFL in targets. And Jarvis Landry sees a bulk of the targets the way things are structured in Cleveland and the way Baker's playing and the way he's seeing the field. So if they're going to put an emphasis on getting the ball to 13, it is going to be a matchup that we'll probably see a good bit of. And I would bet that the winner of that matchup probably belongs to the winning team at the end of the game because, if Odell gets off, I think it'll be a challenge for Buffalo's defense then to be worried and sending shading help. And then you're looking at running lanes that come with that. But I'm seeing some questions about the O-line. Their offensive line is individually not very good. They have some players, J.C. Treader and Joe Bitonio at center and left guard. Right tackle
Our boy
Chris
Wyatt
Hubbard
Teller.
Yeah, well, Wyatt played last week. They finally started him. He hadn't been playing at all. They finally gave him his first start. It was uneven. Didn't run block very well. Didn't really get to finishing things like you would have hoped. Had some nice individual pass protection sets. Didn't do a very good job passing off and communicating twists and exchanges and double teams in pass protection where they're letting one slide at the end to chip somewhere. He had a couple breakdowns there. But they were starting Eric Kush, who's terrible. So if Wyatt can just have a pulse and be decent, it could be a player that helps them. He was okay. He needs to be better this week. Their right side is the big issue because it's Wyatt taking over, and then Chris Hubbard has just been abysmal at right tackle. So that is a place that the Browns are concerned about. Greg Robinson, they benched against New England. I don't know why. Greg Robinson's been fine at left tackle for the most part. He's had a couple plays where you watch the film and you're like, what the hell was that? But for the most part, he's been fine. And then obviously Joel and Treader have been they're better players throughout the year. But it's just a line that lacks cohesion. It's a line that is missing a key block when they need it. They're one block away. And they have not been able to string together, the success that they were able to string together the last half of last year where Baker Mayfield was only hit like 11 times over the course of 8 games. They haven't been able to do that. And really a big reason why is because they've been consistently behind the sticks, whether it's the silly penalties or taking a loss on first down. They lead the league in snaps in 2nd and 15 and 3rd and 10 or more. They've been behind the sticks all year. So, a below-average offensive line that has caused problems. They have not been the biggest problem, but they have not been something that has helped the situation offensively. So it'll be fascinating to see how Buffalo is able to get after Cleveland without blitzing people. And then to your original point, if they have to send help to Tre'Davious because things maybe get rough, that would open up a lot of things for Cleveland. But if you can leave Tre'Davious on an island, you can shut down those force-fed targets to 13, and you can creep people down toward the box. Then you're playing football that the Browns have struggled with, and I'm pretty certain a turnover or two will take place because of a pressing nature that has been a pretty recurring theme.
No, so we know the big names. When I was watching a few games here over the last couple of days, some of the maybe not so well-known names continue to come up. And I think you nailed it already when you talked about Baker Mayfield and that he likes to spread the ball around, that the ball's not always going to the top receivers. You see a lot of touches for Demetrius Harris. You're even seeing Kitchens and Hillard involved in the game. I know one of the Cleveland beat reporters was on our local radio station here, WGR, saying he doesn't want to see Hillard getting the ball on 3rd and short. He'd rather see Chubb getting those carries, but that tells me that the coaching staff believes in these guys. And some of these lesser name guys that maybe Bills fans don't know, or they don't follow because of fantasy football or whatever it is, who do you think could have the biggest type of impact on this game that's kind of trending in the right direction right now?
Well, they bring Kareem Hunt back.
Yeah.
This is his first game back from an 8-game suspension, so I would imagine you see him and not Dontrell Hilliard. 3rd down situations, passing situations, spelling Nick Chubb. That's obviously
what kind of role are you expecting him to come right into?
Tough to tell. I mean, this is his first game. He didn't play in the preseason. I don't know where they're at with it. I would think he's going to probably get 25 snaps maybe, which is probably about fitting. He can do – obviously people forget Kareem made a terrible life decision, and that's your personal preference whether you believe in second chances for things of that nature. Not my discussion to have with people, but he's a really good football player.
Super
people
good football.
Forget that he was one of the best, if not the best, running back in his time playing there for a year and a half. So he brings a lot. I mean, he brings a dynamic skill set that is already a dynamic skill set that is in Nick Chubb. So I don't know how they're going to play him. This will be our first true look at the data. Like I said, I would imagine they give Dontrell Hilliard about 15 snaps a game, give him about 7 touches a game. So maybe 12 to 15 touches if they're on the field. They play 65, 70 snaps. Something along those lines. I think they're going to try to actively get the football into his hands a few times, do some things for him. So that'll be interesting to watch. But I think, Demetrius Harris, he loves targeting tight ends. I think the Browns are going to probably focus on. They're missing David Njoku, their starting tight end that has been a good football player for them for the past years. He broke his wrist week 2. He won't be back for another few weeks. So, but Ricky Seals-Jones took a knee. Had a knee hyperextension. He's day-to-day. He might not play. They're very short-handed at tight end. They lost Pharaoh Brown to a concussion, and they are dealing with Ricky Seals-Jones' knee issue. They brought up a kid, Steven Carlson, UDFA guy who was an Ivy League kid who wasn't very good last week. So that probably hurts them a little bit. But their wide receiver depth is there. They're going to sit in 11 personnel. They're going to play Callaway, Landry. They'll bring Rashard Higgins in some, and then obviously OBJ. But they haven't been that great in 11 personnel, and I'm not sure Baker functions best out of 11 personnel, but I think they're forced or pigeonholed into it right now. So if you're looking for somebody who might have a really breakout game, I think Jarvis Landry is always a threat because he operates so well over the middle of the field. You let him get loose. He's tough to bring down. Not fast, but shifty, tough. He's targeted a lot, and when you're targeted a lot, you get the most opportunity. But if they're going to try to push the football downfield and they're going to go away from Tre'Davious, they might look to try to test Wallace, and they might test him with Antonio Callaway, who can really run. So that could be a long shot guy who could put up maybe a 4 for 80 or a 3 for 90, something silly if he gets loose. So that's something to be prepared for. They're an offense that has no identity yet. So it's tough to sit here and say, well, they're going to give all of these to the – I don't know. They're unpredictable, man. They're trying to find who the hell they are. So we're struggling figuring out who they are week to week. All I can tell you is that he doesn't favor any one person, and he looks to use his tight ends a lot because he likes targeting those areas up the hashes of the field. So he gets them involved, but they're beat up at tight end. So it'll be a wait and see kind of approach for me.
Poor Browns fantasy football fans that have Browns Bears, man. Big picture, let's take a step back at the whole matchup as a whole. How do you see this game going? Give us kind of a little rundown how you see the game going, and then I'm going to put you on the spot and get a prediction from you.
Well, it's so hard for me because they're so all over the board with who they are. If it's hard for me not to be negative. It's really challenging. I've always been a prove it kind of guy. Prove that you're legit. Prove that you're this team that people talk about you being. And I don't know. I do have this weird feeling that Cleveland might sneak up on Buffalo. It might be a game that Buffalo looks over a little bit. I do think it's going to be close. I do think it's going to be probably in that 21-17 type of range, or 20-17. Someone kicks a late field goal to win. I still think Buffalo wins just because they have figured out and they have the culture that supports those sorts of close decision type games. Cleveland has not proven it yet. So I will say that it is a 20-17 last second field goal or overtime field goal to win it for Buffalo, because it's a very negative environment in Cleveland right now, and they haven't won a game at home all year. And when you get in First Energy Stadium and they're losing and the expectations aren't being met, especially if Buffalo is able to put the clamps down on them in the first half and the Boo Birds start to really come out, that would be my biggest thing for Buffalo, is say, hey, we need to win the first freaking quarter. Win the first quarter, take the lead, go into the second quarter, keep that fan base, keep the atmosphere in that stadium negative. then you got it going in the right direction. Because if you do that, you don't because if Cleveland jumps out and puts a couple scores on the board early, that place can get rocking a little bit. Maybe they start believing a little bit, and then it gets tough for Buffalo. But Cleveland's not been a very good first quarter team, so I think Buffalo takes an early lead. I think they find a way to get out 10-0, something along those lines. Cleveland creeps back into it, but Buffalo probably wins this game late. It just feels like it could be a game. Listen, we could talk Sunday night, and it's a game that Buffalo totally overlooked, but I just don't think their coaching staff is wired that way. Their culture, their leaders aren't wired that way from everything I've gathered from the outside, so I don't think it'll be that. But I don't think it'll be a blowout either way. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be something like that 2017 final.
I do agree that I think this is going to be a game similar to a lot of the Bills games this year, where I don't know that they're going to come in and overlook this team. I think they know the talent that's on the other side of the ball. And I think that they may have overlooked the Miami Dolphins already. So they've had that kind of shot like, hey, remember guys, this is the NFL. You cannot overlook these teams. And they came out pretty good against the Redskins, but I think it's going to be a typical 2019 Bills games where it's ugly. They don't put together a full 4 quarters, and that's going to allow whatever the score is at the beginning of the game. That's going to allow this Cleveland team, because Cleveland has come back in almost every game that I've seen. They stay in the game. So if you don't play that complete game, you're going to allow them to come back. So I do think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be an ugly game at times on both sides. I think you're going to see a lot of bad quarterback play from both young quarterbacks at times. I think both defenses will do some things that make the other guy uncomfortable.
A lot of punting, probably, to be honest.
A lot of punting. But I think as far as Bills go, I think it'll be a higher scoring game than we have been used to. But I think it's going to be similar for Bills fans to last week. And I think for you guys, it'll be almost a similar game to what you had last week. And I see it as a 23-19 Bills victory. But really, I urge Bills fans to not get too cocky on Twitter. I think a lot of people look at your guys' record, see 2-6, and say the Bills better win this. They should come out and dominate this team. And I don't think that when this game's over, you're going to feel like either team dominated the other one.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it'll be close. I think it's two franchises who mirror each other a little bit. And when I say mirror, it's one has managed their business, understands what it takes. The other doesn't. So it's like the flip counter. One's more talented, I think, on an individual basis, but doesn't understand what it takes to win and doesn't understand the culture necessary. While on the other side, it's a little less talented, but they do understand the culture and they do understand team building and they do understand camaraderie, those sorts of things. So it'll be very fascinating. But the biggest thing I would be surprised about is if one team blew the other out. I don't particularly see that happening. I think it's close.
Yeah, I agree. So, again, where can the people find you? What kind of work do you have going on? Promo, whatever you got going on, my man.
Yeah. We're at I do a lot of stuff at the Orange and Brown Report. If you find yourself caring about Cleveland football, we do a wide variety of things there. I do film rooms and so on and so forth. Then I have the Browns Film Breakdown podcast as well, which is where I do all of my week-to-week previews and post-games and all of that stuff. And there's a Twitter account that goes with that at Browns Film BDN. And then my personal account, which is always a ton of different film discussions, topics, whatever, is at Jake_Burns18.
Are you still doing a bunch of draft stuff come draft season for Bills fans?
I let it up at the end of 2018 because I just kind of got tired of it.
It's
and I was like,
okay,
maybe we don't have to pay attention to the draft as much. No, I probably will. If they lose this game, I'm going to probably start poking around and doing more draft stuff. But I've kind of let that go because they have a bunch of people at our site who kind of cover that area. So
yeah, it's nice to not have.
Yeah,
to do,
no, that was fun.
I was just talking to the guys in our chat before we're asking them what the Dolphins are going to do. I go, man, how nice is it to cover a team and not have to cover college quarterbacks for a few years?
It's nice, man. It's nice. It's grueling. It's one of the more that and coaching changes. You guys haven't had to deal with that in a while, but. People are mentioning Freddie should be done, and it's just like, God, those conversations are the worst because no one knows. You don't know who's going to be a good coach. You can talk about things, and it's the same with these quarterbacks. It's like it's almost safe to presume they are all just going to suck. Even if you take the first overall guy, you just don't know. It's so unpredictable. NFL is just a different beast than anyone's ever played in before they get to it, and yeah, I don't know. Anyway, hopefully it's a good game, man. I enjoyed coming on. I love talking football with you guys.
Absolutely, man.
Hopefully the end of the day, I just hope it's a good football game and should be fun. I think this could be a fun rivalry down the road.
Yeah, I agree. I'm hoping this is a fun football game. I hope that a lot of these young 2018 quarterbacks all become good, and that it is all fun rivalries across the board, and that we see the type of stuff that we saw from that '84 class and the Marinos and Elways and just that type of fun NFL across the board. I don't wish you guys too much success, but just enough to keep it fun. But I appreciate you coming on, man. It's always good to catch up with you. To all the people out there listening, I do want to urge you to head over to cover1.net. Make sure you're checking out all the content we got ripping out there. If you haven't yet, make sure before game day you check out. Eric did his weekly breakdown of Josh Allen's game. This time he did it with Sal Sports, Sal Capaccio at WGR. Nate was too busy. He's too cool. But it was a really great breakdown. They picked, I think, 5 or 6 throws to really analyze the Josh Allen's game. If you're not sold, I get texts all the time from friends that don't watch or aren't on Twitter, and they're saying, I'm not sold on this guy. I'll send them the video, and they're saying, oh, wow, I didn't see the game that way. I didn't see him making these progressions or these adjustments at the line, things like that. So if you're into that kind of thing, like I am, give yourself, it's some of the best content I think that's out there in the Bills world. While you're over at cover1.net, make sure you head over to our premium subscribers, get in there, get in the Slack channel. It's $20. You get premium content for the entire year. And make sure you catch us Sunday after the game for the breakdown. I won't be there because I'll be traveling, but Greg will be back, and he will be doing the post-game show. And hopefully we're talking about a close victory against the Cleveland Browns here, guys. So thanks for coming out tonight, and we are out.